He had a title, a paycheck, and 22 years of proof that he'd made it. And one afternoon, he walked past a house so broken down that he couldn't make himself keep driving. What happened next turned into a channel with nearly 1 million subscribers. But the part nobody talks about is what it actually costs a man to show up for strangers over and over in a city that has been let down more times than it can count. This is the real story behind Midlife Stockman, not the highlight reel, the whole thing. Sean Stockman spent more than 2 decades working in purchasing for large companies in the automotive world, based out of Michigan. On paper, it was a kind of career people spend their whole lives chasing. He traveled. He earned well. He provided for his wife, Tessa, and their 4 kids. If you'd met him at any point during those 22 years, you would have had no reason to think anything was wrong. That's the part that makes his story different from the usual burnout narrative. Sean wasn't failing. He was succeeding by every metric anyone had ever taught him to measure success by. And he still felt like something essential was missing. To understand why, you have to go back further, to when Sean was 10 years old and lost his father to cancer. That kind of loss doesn't just take a parent away. It reshapes the entire architecture of how a kid learns to be an adult. Sean has talked about how his father-in-law stepped into that gap later in life, teaching him the hands-on, physical, fix-it-yourself skills that a father usually passes down. Those lessons sat quietly in the background for years, while Sean built a very different kind of life, one built on meetings and spreadsheets and long stretches of time indoors. It's worth sitting with that contrast for a second. The skills that would eventually define his life's work were given to him by a man who wasn't his father, filling in for the one he lost too young. Nothing about this story starts clean. It starts with grief that got quietly buried under 2 decades of professional achievement. For most of that time, Sean did what a lot of people do when a job stops fitting but the bills still need to be paid. He kept going. He didn't quit in a dramatic blowout. He didn't have some public falling out with his employer. He simply reached a point where the structure that had once made sense to him no longer did. Somewhere in there, a shift started. The man who spent his weeks inside conference rooms started spending more and more of his personal time outdoors, doing physical work, restoring things with his hands. It wasn't a plan. It was closer to an instinct he couldn't ignore anymore. Then came the afternoon that changed everything. And it wasn't dramatic in the way you'd expect. There was no single blow-up, no ultimatum, no breakdown. Sean was driving through a Detroit neighborhood and past a property that had been abandoned for so long that nature had basically reclaimed it. Overgrowth everywhere. Weeds swallowing the sidewalk. The kind of scene that most people register for half a second and then forget by the next stoplight. Sean didn't forget it. He pulled over. He didn't have a plan, a camera crew, or a business model. He just started pulling weeds because he couldn't make himself keep driving past it. That single afternoon is the entire origin of what would eventually become Midlife Stockman. Not a 5-year plan, not a corporate exit strategy. A man, a shovel, and a piece of property nobody else was going to take care of. When he decided to keep doing it not once but again and again, he was stepping away from the only kind of income and stability he'd known as an adult. That's the detail that gets lost when people talk about following your passion. Sean didn't have a financial cushion built specifically for this. He had 2 decades of experience in an entirely different field, a family depending on him, and a decision that a lot of people would call reckless. He's been honest that the leap into working for himself, with no steady paycheck and no safety net, was frightening. Not thrilling, frightening. And he made it anyway, with his wife standing behind him the whole way. That part matters more than people give it credit for. Every video of Sean working alone in the heat, cleaning up someone else's yard for free, exists because someone at home believed in the decision before there was any proof it would work. Tessa didn't get to see subscriber counts or ad revenue before she said yes to this. She said yes to a guy with a mower and a conviction that this was what he was supposed to be doing. That kind of support doesn't show up on camera, but it's the reason any of this was possible at all. What Sean started doing in Detroit is simple to describe and hard to actually do. He finds properties that have gotten away from the people living there, Not because those people are lazy or don't care, but because life piled up faster than they could keep up with it. Illness, disability, financial strain, grief. The reasons a yard becomes unmanageable are almost never about a lack of effort. They're about a lack of capacity. Sean shows up, sometimes because someone reached out and asked, sometimes because he saw it himself while driving through a neighborhood. And he does the work for free. Hours of it. In Michigan summer heat that regularly hits 90 degrees. With a body that's now in its 40s and doesn't recover the way it used to. It's worth pausing on what these properties actually represent before moving on. Because it's easy to reduce this work to a satisfying before and after clip and miss the human weight underneath it. A yard that's completely overtaken by weeds isn't just an aesthetic problem. In a lot of these situations, it becomes a safety issue, a health issue, sometimes even a legal issue if a city decides a property has fallen out of code. For someone dealing with a disability, an illness, or simply the exhaustion of trying to survive month to month, the yard is often the last thing on a very long list of things they can't get to. It's not neglect. It's triage. People take care of what they can in the order they can manage, and the outside of the house is usually near the bottom of that list. Sean's work exists in that gap, the space between what people need and what they have the capacity to do for themselves. One of the moments that's been documented and confirmed involves a woman named Erin, who answered her door one Monday afternoon to find Sean standing there with a shovel, ready to work. Her first thought wasn't here's help. Her first thought was that he was trying to sell her cable or satellite service, because a stranger showing up unannounced at your door usually means someone's got something to sell. When she realized what was actually happening, that this man had shown up specifically to clean her property at no cost because he'd decided her situation mattered enough to act on, her entire response changed. She described the moment as amazing, as something that felt like genuine community, support rather than a transaction. That reaction, the surprise underneath the gratitude, says something important about how rare this kind of help actually is. People don't expect strangers to show up and just help. They expect the opposite. And that expectation isn't paranoia. It's the residue of a lot of broken promises from a lot of outsiders who came through, made noise, and left nothing behind. That's also why Sean's work isn't always met with open arms. Working alone in neighborhoods that have been overlooked, disinvested in, and occasionally exploited by people posing as helpers means that trust doesn't come automatically. Some neighbors have been suspicious of him. Some have questioned why he's there, even when the person he's helping wanted him there. That tension is uncomfortable to watch, but it's honest. It reflects a community that has learned, through hard experience, to be careful about strangers showing up with promises. Sean absorbs that suspicion as part of the job. He doesn't get to skip past it just because his intentions are good. And the physical toll is real too. This isn't light yard work. Some of these properties take multiple days to clear, with tool after tool getting used until it wears out, case after case of water going through in the heat, and a level of physical exertion that would put most people on the ground well before lunch. Sean is doing this in his 40s, repeatedly, month after month, property after property. There's no stunt double for this kind of labor. There's no editing trick that makes 90-degree heat easier to survive. What you see in the finished video is minutes. What it actually took to get there is hours of a man's body being pushed hard, alone, for someone he'd never met before that day. But the physical cost isn't even the part that seems to weigh on him the most. It's the emotional side of the work that doesn't get talked about nearly enough. Every property has a person attached to it, and every person has a story that led to that property falling apart. Sean doesn't get to clean a yard and drive away untouched. He hears why the yard got that way. He sees the conditions people are living in. He witnesses up close what it looks like when someone has been quietly struggling for so long that asking for help starts to feel pointless. That's not something you leave behind with the lawn clippings. It follows you home. It follows you into the next property, and the one after that. Sean has been fairly open about the fact that this kind of work takes something out of a person that a paycheck can't put back. He's built a way to keep the mission financially sustainable, add revenue from the channel, a membership community, merchandise, and partnerships with companies that supply tools and equipment. That structure is real, and it works. It's the reason he can keep showing up for people who can't pay him anything at all. And it's worth being clear-eyed about what that funding model actually means, because it's easy to misread it cynically. Sean isn't charging the families, he helps. The people watching from home, the ones who buy him a coffee or join a monthly membership or send equipment off a wish list, are effectively subsidizing free labor for strangers they'll never meet. That's a genuinely unusual arrangement. Most businesses ask you to pay for a service rendered to you. This one asks people to pay so a service can be rendered to someone else entirely, someone they may never see, in a city many of them have never visited. It only works because enough people decided that mattered to them. But making a living from this and being emotionally depleted by it are not opposites. Both can be true in the same person at the same time. He's mentioned that he used to run marathons regularly and hasn't run one in years. In a strange way, his life now is its own kind of endurance event, not measured in miles, but in properties, in people, in the accumulated weight of showing up for strangers again and again with no finish line in sight. The name of the channel, Midlife Stockman, sounds almost like a joke at first. Midlife crisis is the punchline people expect. A guy hits 40, does something impulsive, and everyone waits for it to blow over. But what actually happened doesn't fit that mold. Sean didn't buy a motorcycle or disappear for a weekend. He built something that has run for years, that has grown to a community of hundreds of thousands of people, and that has materially changed the conditions of dozens and dozens of properties and the people living on them. Calling that a crisis undersells it. It was closer to a redirection. 22 years of quiet dissatisfaction finally pointed somewhere specific. What makes this story worth telling honestly, instead of just as an inspiring highlight reel, is the part that doesn't resolve neatly. Sean Stockman cannot personally fix what's broken in an entire city. He can clear one yard, help one family breathe a little easier, restore a small piece of dignity to one property at a time. But for every home he reaches, there are more he hasn't gotten to yet. More people waiting, more properties falling further behind, more situations that took years to unravel and won't be undone in a single afternoon with a shovel. That's not a criticism of what he's built. It's the honest scale of the problem he decided to take on with nothing but his own two hands and a decision to stop driving past things that were broken.